everyone for joining us today for our first third Tuesday event of the year. We're going to be getting together every month, really at the same time. A couple times a year, we will also expand it to a little bit longer of a segment, but every third Tuesday of every month, we'll be getting together over the course of the year to dig into some really important topics from an innovation perspective. So today we wanted to start out with rethinking labor and have a great panel that we'll introduce you to in a moment. But I would like to take a second and before we get started and talk a little bit about who we are. For those of you who may not be aware, the Alliance is a nationwide community of game changers. We'd like to say from dirt to dweller, so a lot of different stakeholders in the industry, looking at the future of housing through crowd-accelerated innovation. So really trying to take the best of ideas from different people within our community and experts from without, and use that to drive forward innovation in housing. We look at the future of housing really from three lenses. From a business perspective, the impact on the consumer, and the home delivery process. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about labor. And really the reason that we're here is we've been touching on a lot of topics that really are linked to what's going on in labor over the last several years, including industrialization of the construction process, digitization, a lot of things that have impact on labor, looking at attainability of housing. And really we wanted to look at labor more directly this year as part of our program, because we see that certainly having the right people is critical to success. As an industry, we've changed quite a bit over the last several years. I think probably more than we had changed over 20 years. But the workforce that we have hasn't, and the way that we've approached bringing people into the market has not changed either. And we still have a huge issue in terms of labor. So we think it's time to step back and say, what should we be doing and what could we be doing differently to attract new talent, to get more diversification in the workforce, and to train them for really what the jobs are to be done in housing today, as opposed to housing 15, 20 years ago. So that's the focus of what we're doing today. And we do have a great panel. We'll introduce you to them in a moment, but wanted to take a second to thank our partners, without whom we wouldn't be able to put together programs like this. So we do have a bit of, some great leading companies in the industry who support us almost in a PBS fashion, and also offer some of their insights and expertise in some of the topic areas that we dig into. So thank you to those of you on the phone who are partners. And hopefully you guys who aren't our partners see some companies that you recognize and that you work with here as well. Next, if we can talk a little bit about the format for today. So we're going to do a panel with the folks that you see on the phone for about the first 30 minutes. Tom Rosenfeld from Hill Stafford is going to really facilitate some discussion among them. But we want to make this as engaging and interactive as possible. So use your chat function, please, to submit questions or even comments that you have. Tom is going to facilitate the discussion among the panelists, and I'm going to be watching for what you're asking and pulling those questions and comments into the conversation as best I can as well. And without further ado, I just want to turn the floor over to Tom, and thank you so much, Tom, for leading today's discussion. Tom's with Hill Stafford, and he's got an excellent background on both the finance and the policy side, and really bringing disparate groups together, key stakeholders, to drive innovation in those areas, and has a specific bent and interest toward labor. So he'll make a good facilitator for today's discussion. So Tom, if you want to introduce yourself at all as well, and then introduce us to each of the panelists.
Thank you, Betsy. Appreciate your words and your introduction. I'm just going to flip off here. My name's Tom Rosenfeld, as you heard, and I don't need to go into more about myself, but I do want to introduce our panelists. We have a great group of panelists today. We have Brek Goin, who is CEO of Hammr. Hammr company provides a mobile platform and tools for the housing and building industry. They're focused especially on empowering and building the next generation workforce by helping contractors streamline their workforce and workers to navigate and manage their career. Brek himself was just elected last year to the Pro Builders 40 under 40 class. So congratulations to Brek on that, and welcome to our panel today. We also have then Branka Minic. And Branka is CEO of the Building Talent Foundation. She has over 30 years experience balancing supply and demand for skills in large markets in the US and across 47 countries around the world. Building Talent Foundation focuses on the talent pipeline, seeking to improve retention of newly hired employees in the sector. Building Talent was launched just this last year by Leading Builders of America. So congratulations on that accomplishment, Branka, and welcome to the panel. We also have with us today Dr. Charner Rodgers. Dr. Rodgers is an associate professor and senior program coordinator of industry relations at the School of Architecture and Construction Science and Management at Tuskegee University. Charner is a former civil engineer and GC construction manager. She is inspiring women and African Americans across the country to enter the housing workforce. She brings more than 15 years of direct experience, and on a historic and wonderful accomplishment also last year at IBS, Charner helped make history when the first student team from Tuskegee University was named the first all-female, all-African American team at IBS's competition. And that's in over 30 years. So congratulations, Charner, on that accomplishment, and welcome and thank you for joining us today. And last but not least up, Ledger Stecker, who's Executive Vice President of Operations for the Brewer Companies, hails from my former hometown long time ago, Arizona. Brewer is Arizona's largest plumbing contractor. And Ledger is spending a lot of time rethinking the way Brewer operates and responds to today's customers and home delivery solution mix, exploring opportunities, including expanding their service offering and more strategically partnering with off-site providers. So he's going to bring a very different industry perspective to today's panel. So thank you for joining us, Ledger, as well. And let's get started. One of the big keys to a talent in today's industry is attracting and retaining talent. That's really the key. But two trends, which are disturbing trends, which are challenges to the 21st century housing labor force, are one, for every one person who joins the construction trades, 5 leave. And the second disturbing trend and statistic is for every new hire who joins the industry, 3 leave. So two of the most important, I think, significant factors impacting these trends are training and education of the next generation talent and diversification. And that's where we're going to spend time today. So let's start with next generation talent. And Branka, to you, can you start us off broadly? What are some of the challenges in the housing industry which are causing the labor statistics I cited? Why are we not retaining talent?
Thank you, Tom. That was a great introduction to get us going. So I love numbers, so I'm going to throw some numbers out, and then when you think I should stop, you just say ice cream, okay? So home building is a very important industry. It contributes 15 to 18% to GDP, and every dollar invested in this industry creates $3 for GDP. There is about 3 million people working in this industry, building 1 million homes through 50,000 companies. And the unemployment right now in the midst of this COVID crisis is 4.5% in residential construction versus 7.9% for all other industries. We have about 300,000 job openings, and we have this shortage of labor that is plaguing the industry for years. So what is the problem? Where is the problem? So we did, as Building Talent Foundation got created, we did 250 interviews with individuals in the industry, and 350 different studies were reviewed. And we said, The problem is threefold. There is a problem, like you said, in the talent pipeline. We're not getting enough talent into the industry and enough diverse talent into the industry. Then there are not enough connections between existing training and education programs and employers. And brewer companies is actually an example of a firm that's really doing different things. So they are truly connecting with education and training providers and really investing in their talent. So that's a problem that not every companies are resolving. And then on the back end, we are bleeding out talent. Like you said, that's the statistics. Why is this important at all? Well, why the shortage is important? Well, first of all, for the industry is losing money because of this. So every day that a builder cannot identify the right crew on their job sites, it costs them money, few hundred dollars per home. So $300 to $400 is the loss of profit. And every time there are mistakes because of lack of skills and training of our workforce, again, the builders lose money. 26,000 is one of the statistics I found as the cost per home for inadequate skills. Okay, on the other side, what happens to communities? If there is not enough labor, the prices of homes goes up. The labor costs go up, the prices of homes goes up. And every $1,000 more in that price, there is 127,000 families in the United States that are priced out of home ownership. And then home ownership, if it goes down, the communities become less stable. And we have increased crime rates and drug use and teen pregnancies. So there is a tremendous societal consequence and business consequence to labor shortage. So we really need to address this problem.
Thank you, Branka. And I'm going to follow up on one of the comments you made and turn to you, Ledger, and talking about some of the things that count for these statistics. Your company, Brewer, has started the Craftsman Academy. Can you talk about your perspective in that role and how that plays into next generation talent?
Yeah. So a number of years ago, we were already experiencing the labor shortage, like in a difficult way with our customers. We were unable to fulfill the production commitments of large home builders in Arizona and Tucson, Phoenix and Tucson. And we had this story that there just wasn't labor out there. We had the story that what labor existed was too costly and hard to train. So that's kind of where we lived. And we realized though that there's no possible way to grow our business and fulfill the demand that the home builders had without like changing our perspective. So our president came up and our CEO, Mike Brewer, came up with an idea of like, let's start our own Craftsman Academy. And we realized that we didn't know anything about that. I mean, we've been doing training systems that were pretty inadequate over time to train, plumbers in our industry. So what we decided to do is go after somebody who had done that kind of work before. So we hired a guy out of Grand Canyon State University to be a program administrator. We developed a curriculum. We built a mock environment in our warehouse, and then partnered with the Casa Grande School District and built a mock environment in one of their facilities as well. And that was that. And then we started building a curriculum where we could build standardization and break down the different specializations inside our own trade to train people. But the one of the first challenges we had was that we weren't able to effectively find people. And so what we had a marketing problem. And I think we'll talk a little bit later about how the industry in general has a marketing problem with the narrative of what construction could be for a career for someone. But we didn't even know how to reach people. We took our marketing department and we redirected our marketing department for our service businesses. We redirected it towards employment. So we started having them meet people where they spent time online, and pretty soon we were overwhelmed with the number of people applying for our positions. So we went through a lot of learning as we brought people on. One of the big things that we learned was that you can't just build a Craftsman Academy, try to train people in 4 months and then push them out to the field. We lost like tons of people at the very beginning. Right now we're retaining, about 45% of the 80% of people that graduate from our Craftsman Academy, but we've gone through a lot of trials and learning to get to that point. So some of the things that we've done, just to give you an idea of like how to support people, we created like a boot camp, so to speak, where the first 2 weeks we simulate the environment that everyone's going to be working in. So when people apply, they go through, we have like an artificial intelligence recruiting system that helps identify who the best candidates are and kind of pre-qualify them. But then we put them in a 2-week program where they're out in the field and they get to experience the work. They get to experience what it feels like to deal with the weather conditions, experience the physical nature of the work. And they go through a process where they get evaluated and then we give them feedback. And then they finally enter our Craftsman Academy. And in that Craftsman Academy, then they move through, we pay them hourly. So they don't come in, they're making money as they start with us. And they go through about a 4-month period where they have both in-class and in-field training. Before, when they move out of that, they're then put into an apprenticeship program where we have mentor coaches that are working side by side with them. They get put in what we call our paired with peer program. So they get to work with another plumber, because we're a plumbing company. They work with another plumber who has been successful in the environment. And so they work right next to them. And we also realize that because we work with a distributed workforce of people across all of Arizona, so we have, do roughly 7,000 to 8,000 jobs a year. They're all over the place. We didn't have a sense of what people were experiencing without putting some new positions in our company, like employee care positions. So we have people driving around now that are meeting and speaking with these guys as they go through these programs. And you have to constantly adapt your program to adjust for like the challenges that you're not even ready for. But through that, we've been able to build like a capacity in our organization that we probably have 20% more capacity than we can use today, because the surrounding trades around us are not doing the same thing. So we get bottlenecked with that parade of trades because the other trades around us are struggling to find the same labor. So I don't know if that explained a little bit about it, but like without that academy, we would have been in the same place we were 4 years ago, talking about how there's no labor in the marketplace.
Well, I think that's fantastic, Ledger. Thank you. And I think it really does, because it picks up on the theme that Branka really started, which is this pipeline. And the two of you now have spoken a lot about the pipeline once somebody is already in the labor force, which of course is natural, makes a lot of sense. It's where we need to, as an industry, focus a lot of our time and attention. But all too often we find that we forget the pipeline starts from before you enter the workforce. Right? We can't have doctors if we don't have people who are going to medical school, and they can't go to medical school if they're not getting the education they need in advance on the sciences and relevant courses. So I turn to you, Charner, now, because I think of what Ledger's doing is the back end in the sense of people already in the pipeline, but you're an educator. In part anyway, you also are a GC, but you're an educator, and so you see the front line. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing and how it impacts retention and how it impacts this pipeline. What have you learned as a professor and educator that we should know that's missing or that's been successful?
So let's start with the original pipeline, which used to be your dad was a general contractor, so you became a general contractor. That was our original pipeline back in the day. That's how we got all the builders coming up under us. Our second original pipeline was in the high school, when they had trades in the high school. 20 years ago, you could go and become a beautician when you graduate from high school. You can do home economics. You had construction. You had auto mechanics. Those things are taken out now. What has happened is something that used to be free now costs money to go to a secondary school. So now we get into the argument, is it good to go to the secondary 2-year school, a trade school, and learn this and go from there? Should I go to a certificate program and get my education for there, or should I actually spend and invest in going to college? Okay. So what I do is that I get kids now that has came to college. And I also try, with help the Greater Montgomery Home Builders, is that we set up competitions for younger kids, high school age kids, to come and do a residential competition and then try to recruit them from that way. It is important that we have mentorship in this industry. The average home builder right now is 59 years old. That's the average. The people that's coming in is 25, 26, 27. There's not only a generational gap, but there is a knowledge gap between the two. We have to have people that go back in and pull those people from the bootstrap and say, hey, we would like to mentor you. We would like to get to know you. What I do at my university is first, I make sure that our curriculum is good. So if our curriculum is kind of off or not in line with the industry rules, then it's up to me to make sure that we are giving the industry what they want. I want to make it win-win. So first, I want to make sure they got the correct curriculum. Then I want to make sure that their technology is correct, because this is how you can bridge that gap, because a lot of the older guys is not technologically savvy, so they depend on these younger guys to help them, okay? And then I instruct them of, hey, you might be coming in as a project manager, but you have a lot to learn from those that are up under you. So when you go in, don't go in as, hey, I'm the boss, do what I say. Go in, it's like, hey, I'm an overseer, but I want to learn from you of how you've been able to be in this industry this long. So, if we start making this career attractive to people, which we are doing good with social media, we're also doing good with HGTV. You'll be surprised how many students have been recruited by HGTV, or Homes on Homes, or Flip This, or Love It or List It. And people come in and they say, these people are making so much money. I think this is what I want to do. And I have to explain, okay, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but you need to understand the trade and learn the trade and love it before you go into it. So I think the most important thing that we can do now is make sure the kids are educated correctly. B, have them with a mentor that will be willing to talk to them and take time with them. And C, when it comes to women and people of color, we're now seeing an uptake in that. So it's just actually having people giving them a chance. And a lot of people do really well. They just need that one chance to get in the door and be able to prove themselves. And once you start seeing diversity in a company, when people come in, they see other people that look like them. And now they're able to say, hey, I identify with that company. That's a place I want to work.
Which is really eye-opening. A couple of things you said, and it's how sensible and simple it is in many ways, and yet how we've forgotten it, right? The generational aspect, and yet we still do that today. I mean, doctors who have kids who are doctors and lawyers and accountants and engineers and so on and so forth. And having lost the trades, having lost the mentorship, and having lost some of the generational aspect in this particular industry, you're pointing out, that really impacts. And then on top of it, if we don't have the diversity, people start to look and say, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not really for me. And I imagine, Brek, that really impacts the image of the industry, right? And Charner touched on this. We not only have to have the pipeline, but it has to be viewed as a pipeline to a career, not a job, and one that we want to be involved in, which means it's got to be companies we want to be associated with, the win-win that Charner mentioned as well. So let's talk about that now, having talked a little bit about what I call the front end on the education, the back end on the career training. What about the middle, the reputation and the image? How is that impacting labor? What are some of the keys to communicating the opportunities for a career in housing, some of the things that Charner has mentioned?
Yeah, she made some really good points. I think on the front end for the narrative, for us personally, we've learned a lot. Our birthday for the company was January 16th, and we've learned a lot this past year. But I think for us personally, being a technology company, how we market ourselves, like we very much lean into the pride and that kind of like blue collar attitude that the construction industry just loves. Attracting the next generation hasn't been a super big issue for us. I would say a majority of the members that we see coming through Hammr in these profiles, they're under 35. And we even see a lot of people that are proudly displaying through their bios that they're 22, 21, and even sometimes as young as 17. And so us on the front end being a technology company and just us leaning really hard into how we market ourselves through social media, attracting them and pulling them out of the woodwork hasn't been a big issue for us. And I think a lot of this next generation talent is coming to us because we're a very organic, authentic, and very inclusive community. I mean, all of us on the panel and everybody listening to this, we know that, one of the main reasons why people come into the industry is because they have a family member in it. It's a very exclusive industry. And so I think what we've been able to do over the last year is break down some of that barrier that the incoming talent sees. Now, speaking of barriers, first I want to touch on like the national narrative. I think it's great with all these organizations pushing a new narrative, a perception and everything. But I think there's some really missing key components. Like when NKBA, their Next Up program, goes to high schools, the parents and the students that let's take out the people that didn't have a family member in construction, but they are so misinformed on the simple things, whether it's career opportunities, the pay rates, which everybody has a different pay rate on different geographical locations. So that's really hard to nail. But even the impact of college debt, career advancements, and then just the variety of skill sets, if they don't get any of that hands-on or that education, it's very hard to appeal to them. So I think there's some key components that are needed for there, but I think the biggest thing is the national narrative. Now, the one thing that I do want to bring up is when I first started on the journey of building the company, and I think a lot of organizations are doing this, they're trying to lean into a reality of let's kind of strip the blue collar out of it, not that rough and rugged type of thing. But as we built the company for the last year, since we've been able to lean into that, I mean, if you're talking about incoming talent to the construction industry, and let's talk about the labor shortage, not the back office shortage, we need to lean into that, physical demanding kind of blue collar attitude, because that's going to be a majority of their first 5 to 10 years in the industry anyways. So if we strip that narrative and not lean into the pride and everything that's associated with being out in the field and building stuff that 90% of the world can't do anyways, then we're kind of like stripping the identity and a belief system out of the people of why they joined in the first place. So I think for us, as we've kind of challenged that narrative, we're leaning into what people in the field really value. But I think, just from an overall perspective, we do need to do a better job of mapping out the career advancements from, okay, your first 5 to 10 years are probably going to be in the field. Now we need to start retraining you for soft skills, behavioral skills, so that you can go into a managerial role. I think where we're really kind of missing is a lot of people coming into the construction industry, they don't view it as a career, they view it as a gig. They'll hop around builder to builder, whichever builder can keep them busy the longest, that's who they're going to stay with. But I think we need to do a better job of, okay, and mapping out to high schools. Okay, the first 5 to 10 years, you're going to be in the field. This is likely what your job is going to look like. Here's the physical requirements. These are the pay increases and advancements. Okay, at year 10 or whatever it is, now we're moving you more to a managerial role. The physical requirements are less. So I think we just need to do a better job as an industry of being very transparent what the career actually entails from start.
I think one of the things you're touching on, Charner mentioned earlier, which is the idea of a win-win, right?
Yeah.
And from my perspective, we see in too many industries, too many companies that aren't perceived as investing in their employees so that they can provide that long-term roadmap that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Evidenced in some ways by the training program that Ledger mentioned, so that people can look forward to these things. And of course, employees have to return the favor, and they have to view things as an interest in investing in their company and not just a gig. One of the questions that we had that I think touches on this was For you specifically or directly, Charner, but I think this is applicable also to you, Ledger, in the industry, and Branka, what you're seeing across the country and around the world, quite frankly. But to you first, Charner, and that is, what are the positions that your students are being hired for, and by which companies? And I think what's particularly would be interesting is to understand within the confines of what we've been talking about and what Brek has now raised of this pipeline, what is available to them? Are they being pushed into certain areas that's making Ledger's job more difficult to promote them and see this as a career as opposed to a job? Shed some light while we answer that question, please.
So one thing that I do is I teach all my students, it's a number of careers you can go into majoring in construction management. It's not always sticks and bricks. You can go into marketing, you can go into inspections, you can go into residential, commercial. So I try to give them an opportunity to not only think about it, but also explore. So we have a number of internships that different company offers us every year. A lot of times in most paths that I see is either superintendent path or project management path. So they are trained to go those ways. A few of our students do get hired for estimating and scheduling, but most likely they want to go into the field. So we have more students that go as an assistant project manager or an assistant superintendent from school. Now, depending on if they've had experience or not, they might come in at a lower level, maybe as a field engineer or as something lower in the office if they go into the office. But they know when they're getting there, their career ladder. They mean that they know that they need to possess these skills to make it to the next thing. I will say that my students that do not experience an internship before going out to the field don't do as well as my students that experience an internship. I think that people don't understand the importance of this because maybe you don't like it. And so doing an internship shows you like, hey, I might do an internship this year with a commercial builder and I decide, oh, I don't want to look at rebar for 9 months. So I'm going to go over here with residential. And I'm like, oh, I like this go quick. Or I might like highway, but you never know until you tried it. So I tell everybody, if you wait till the day you graduate to get a job or internship, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Well,
so I think,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So I think the one thing that I try to push is that you get an internship and you try out all the roles to make sure that when you graduate, you really know what you want to go into.
And that's important, I think, for corporate America as well, because it might be a different interest by sector, as you mentioned, Charner, but it also may be just within the organization. I know when I started 25 years ago on Wall Street, the firm had me in a training program and I worked in the back office and on the revenue production side and on the analyst side. And it was so that you saw all aspects. The presumption is I wanted to be in that sector. But I think your point is well taken. For you, Ledger, what are you seeing? And specifically with the academy, have you seen retention rates go higher? And if so, why do you think that is? And if not, why do you think not?
Well, so let me see if I can address the first question. With the explosion of technology and the changes that are happening in the industry, there are so many opportunities that are popping up in our companies that didn't exist 10 years ago. I mean, I've got everything from CAD and BIM designers to even computer programmers. We've had people go through the Craftsman Academy and found out that they were a computer programmer that could never find a job in computer programming, but now they know construction, and we're building software applications to manage construction, so that they've gone through the academy, learned how to plumb, and then have been able to jump out and learn how and then work for us as a programmer designing software, right? We've everything from project managers to superintendents to marketing roles in construction. Like hiring a marketing company to market to construction doesn't work unless they have some background in construction and understand the audience that they're going to be targeting, right? Everything business intelligence. I've got teams of people in our organization building dashboards and reports to help us manage the company better. But you can't do that unless you understand what we're managing. If you don't understand the operations of the business and you haven't been through the field, I have a very hard time teaching somebody that's a programmer to design those kind of dashboards, right? So what we're seeing is that bringing people through that Craftsman Academy helps them understand the concerns of our specific trade in a way that they can do so many other jobs in the business. So did I answer your question there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, Tom,
And Tom,
Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
would like to say one thing is that I would implore that each person who owns a company maybe do a rotation program for their new hires. That way they are able to go through each stage of the company to see that, hey, I don't like it on this side, but instead of just quitting the company, I can go to this side. That seems to really help with retention. I've seen a lot of students come in at one thing and say, hey, I didn't like this, but I do like the crew over here and I like how they work. And they were able to transfer to that department. Whereas you didn't spend all that time relocating them, getting their benefit package together, only for them to leave within 6 months.
And that's, to me, what investing in employees in the long term is all about, and employees being invested in the company itself. Branka, you wanted to mention something. I want to throw a question to you as well, for a second half for you, if you will, and that is senior level talent. We've been talking about pipelines, which are more focused on entry and mid-level, perhaps. What about for companies that need senior level talent? How does any of this impact them?
Tom, let me first address the first part of this conversation, where there's actually two workforces in this industry. There is the workforce that finds jobs at I would say these degree level positions that are maybe working for builders or working for other companies, for corporate America. And then there are people in this also industry that are skilled technical workers, not have maybe some certifications, but do not have college degrees. And those individuals may work for companies like brewer company or a builder, but many of them work for smaller or medium-sized companies and sometimes even as independent contractors. There is great fragmentation in this workforce, and therefore the same rules that apply maybe for some other industries that are better organized with better career pathways and credentialing do not apply here. And we need to fix that. We need to think of the talent in this industry as a whole and all of us responsible for it. We need to build a culture of collaboration over talent development and not war on talent and competition. So, in that spirit, Building Talent Foundation is trying to build these regional skills coalitions. We're now in 7 markets and soon to expand, where we bring on one side employers, on the other side education, and on the third side government agencies, so that we can have partnerships and work collaboratively on these issues. It's really, I think we need to change our culture along with the narrative and really build the investments that go in overall talent in this industry.
It sounds like what I'm hearing out of the panelists partially is that the industry perhaps has gotten away from long-term thinking, and that the industry and employers are thinking job to job, right? They're not making a commitment for fear of being caught on the wrong side of an economic trend, let alone a collapse, and how these companies can change their thinking along those lines as well. We're going to turn in a few minutes to diversification, but Brek, do you have some ideas on ways that companies can think about being a little more long-term in mindset? We have one of our attendees today comment about employers coming to campus in April or May, but students who have been part of mentorship or other programs have already committed. And so it's coming up something empty-handed. How do we get these companies to think a little bit more long-term?
Yeah, I mean, first engaging with the workforce. We've seen a lot of success through social media. I think Leisure pointed out in the beginning was meeting people where they're at. I think that really helps on the front end. But I would say more needs to be done around the worker recognition. This is something that has helped us so much. And this is not only a front end, this is like a very back end too. Just with the national narratives and even majority of the construction companies. If you look at the majority of construction companies, they're not companies that have over 100 employees that have marketing departments, can engage in all this HR, career development, employee development. And so there's a lack of resources as well. But I think more needs to be done on recognizing the workforce. Now, I have had pushback on this because you know, you don't always want to recognize your most scarce resource, right? You don't want to put them out there for the potential to be poached. But I think what we're really struggling with as an industry is we're thinking short term, like, I need this crew for the next project. They're not thinking, I need this crew so that it can develop the next people in line so that we can keep growing our company. And so it's not only a front end issue of recognizing the employees for what they do, maybe involving them with some decision making, but if you're not doing that up front work, you got a leaky bucket. And so you're constantly just blowing through talent. And so I think what we really need to improve on is the worker recognition. And that's going to really help develop the employees for long term. And I think intrinsically they'll start seeing the industry as less of a gig and more of a career if we start making that investment. But I think just overall, a vast majority of the businesses in the United States, they don't have all the resources in the world. So we need better policy. We need better government backing, apprenticeship programs that can do a lot of the heavy lifting for a majority of the businesses. Because if we preach this message and, you know, most of this next generation talent is going to go to those 80% of the businesses that is a much smaller firm, that has to match up to the realities that we're presenting them.
I think that messaging and your point is really crucial. And it makes me think of something that I've only heard mentioned once today. I think it was by Branka, but that's the role of the public policy makers, the legislators, and coming from that angle now, no longer directly in the real estate industry. My first question would be for everyone, who shared a story with the legislators and what's going on in Capitol Hill or within the state legislators to push these policies to try and entice companies to set up the mentoring programs or to work with universities to better prepare their students to make it more collaborative. That sounds like that's going to be key. And I don't want to digress, but I want to make that point because I think it's a great segue into the diversification part of our discussion today, which obviously we know legislators are heavily involved in that topic, broadly speaking. But bringing it down to today's topic, Charner, as a professor at Tuskegee, which has a very diverse a campus, a lot of women, people of color, what resonates with your students about the housing industry? Why are they attracted? How can we increase the number of students? What's working well? What's not working well?
So I just want to start out, it's just before I came there, the only people who really recruited heavily for Tuskegee students were commercial industry. They came, we had, you know, the Beck Group, big major companies, Holder, different things like that. When I got there, my passion is home, residential construction. I was voluntold as a child that was what I was going to do. I was my dad's only child and he didn't have a boy. So I became the one who went into the construction after him. So when I got there, we introduced the NAHB, which is the National Housing, a National Association for Home Builders. And we had the competition, as you mentioned before. Now, when I looked at my list that I put outside my door, the first 7 people to sign up were all girls. And I was thinking, wait a minute, what? This is odd. I've never had this before. So I looked and I never did get any boys. So I just said, hey, we're going to do an all girls team and we're going to take it and we're going to see how this goes. From that very moment, we went to not having a chapter before to having 17 students in there by the end of August to 33 for the whole year. Now, our student body in that particular college is only 130 students. So we had captured almost a third of the students just by telling them what was going on. What I started doing is I started inviting people that look like them to come and do meet and greets. A lot of builders came and did meet and greets. We did a lot of networking events where I got those students out in front of the residential home builders so they could see them. A lot of people didn't even know Tuskegee actually exists. And they really didn't know that we had a construction management department, even though it's the oldest in the country. So, able to network with them, talk to them, that's another win-win. They were able to speak to them, get to know them outside of this, what's your GPA, what's your work experience? And so these people were able to establish relationships. And then it really mattered to people. It really mattered to my students. And so me coming in, introducing them to this sector of construction, they really got interested in it. So interested, now I'm writing a residential minor for the program. So that I think that's exciting. And we have a lot of students that are encouraged. Not only did we have our construction management students wanting to do it, our architect students were very involved in too. They have now did construction management minors. So everybody likes to be a part of something. And that's what I think that we're missing. It can't be a us versus them as far as the new generation and the old generation. It has to be that we're working together. And when you introduce somebody to something and you make it so great, they have no choice but to like it. And I think that's what happened. Like now, I'm reaching my business majors who like, hey, I want to come into real estate development in the residential industry. I'm reaching my engineers that's coming. And so now it's getting bigger, but it's never was introduced before. People don't know what they haven't been introduced to. So I think we have to do better as into getting with our colleges, our local colleges, and making sure that they know the residential industry is out there and we are viable. That we do make money, that it's not feast and famine, as we heard over the years that, you know, a builder have an F-150 truck, then he'll drive a Pinto the next month because he couldn't pay it. He didn't close enough houses, but that you actually get regular paychecks. And this is a great thing. I tell everybody, yeah, you might can go into the commercial making a little bit more, but then you have to think of your time versus value of money. How many hours are you working at that construction job, making that money? And how many hours are you working at your residential job? Do you have your weekends off? Are you able to have a home life? And people end up saying, okay, I know they might be paying me maybe 5 to 10 grand more, because that's usually what the difference is. But when I look at my bonuses and I look at my time that I get away, I'm actually making more money going residential than I am anything else. So like I said, we have to make this career back that, hey, this is actually a career and you can make money off of it. Everybody want to know that they're stable, they can make money, and they're going to have a job.
So that comes back to messaging, what Brek mentioned early on, right? And also you're underscoring that it's a win-win. If companies open up and are a little more creative where they recruit, who they recruit, why they recruit, the long-term nature of the recruiting, they're going to dramatically increase potentially the pipeline, which dramatically increases the number of your students and so on. Ledger, to you, on a related point, obviously Brewer has been involved kind of that back end of the career training, but what about with higher education? How can corporate America also engage with Charner students and other students to help push and train this pipeline?
Yeah, I don't think you just go to the career fairs, right? So I accidentally stumbled on some of this stuff. I was building a scheduling system in the mid 2000s, and I met a doctor at the School of Construction at ASU. His name was Dr. Bashford, Howard Bashford. And he had, I told him what I was working on. And he said, well, the best way for you to figure out how to build that is to come and start working with ASU a little bit more. So I ended up becoming a faculty associate there and got all kinds of exposure to all the students, from construction management to engineering, and they all had programs and projects and research that they were doing, and they needed companies to volunteer data and volunteer platforms for them to do their projects on. So since mid 2000s, I've been doing that. And what's come out of that is I've gotten to know the students, and I got to know what their interests were, what their capabilities were, and they got to know me personally in a way where when the career fairs come about and everybody's speaking to them, Brewer already had an identity with them. I had an identity with them, and we've hired so many people from the community colleges, from the universities, just by being involved. And it's not just me. We push our middle level managers to volunteer and participate with everything from CTE programs with high schools to working with the local community colleges to actually doing lectures on materials and methods in the universities as guest lecturers. And so, we started our schematic design program by hiring a lady right out of Arizona School of Construction, Arizona State University School of Construction, and she helped launch our whole schematic design department that's running and been running now for a good 6-7 years. So, my opinion is it's not just going to the career fairs, it's getting involved, it's being part of it, and making the company an opportunity for those those students to work with.
So that comes back again. I'm now hearing a lot of recurring themes: investing in the future, looking long term, making it a win-win. That's fantastic. Brek, I know you touched on this earlier. If you can expand a little bit on the mentorship, right? Again, this plays a middle ground here between education and career training. What are some of the things that can be done by companies or organizations along those lines? And you had mentioned NKBA. I don't know if you want to expand on that, or if there are other organizations that are good examples.
Yeah. First and foremost, mentoring is a form of messaging. It's a form of worker recognition. You're putting your workforce in a role of responsibility to transfer knowledge from experienced generation to new generation. So I think that's really, really important for companies to put their workforce in a position where they can transfer that knowledge. That's in return going to build better engagement, and they're going to feel like they have some equity in the business. But for us personally, we did partner with NKBA, and what we've started experimenting with is connecting our members on Hammr with students going through NKBA Next Up's pipeline. So what that basically looks like is, let's say, for example, we had a real example of a 25-year-old apprentice electrician, and NKBA had students that were interested in an electrical career. What we did was we went and got our members. We brought 4 of them in. We had electricians and carpenters for this one. They got matched up with a group of students. They had a Zoom call. And what was really cool about that is they had the opportunity to connect with real people in the workforce in the most authentic way. It's not, here's a brochure. It's, this guy is, one of them was on his lunch break on the job site talking to them about what it's like to be a lead carpenter. But they get to ask the question of, what's your day-to-day look like? What are the career advancements look like? How's your experience been? What should I expect? What do you love about your job? What do you not like about your job? And has it been financially rewarding? So I think for us, we've just been able to, I think it's just overall experimenting with your workforce, putting them in a position of responsibility and transferring that knowledge. I think that's a big thing that our industry talks about is we have this generational gap. Now we need to leverage the workforce by empowering them. I don't think we need to stray away from leveraging the workforce, because we do need to shift that knowledge share. So I think with what we've been experimenting with NKBA, connecting our members with the next generation coming in, it's building a really authentic relationship. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be in your local city or county or whatever. This is through COVID and everything, we've been empowered by technology this entire year. And so with the ability to have a Zoom call, it makes it so much easier on workers too. They get off the job site, or they have lunch, or they're sitting in their truck or whatever it is. It's just making the access to the workforce so much easier. And so I think that's one of the biggest opportunities, not only what we're doing, but I think for a lot of the other companies too.
Quick interjection. We're getting some really great comments from everybody. Most of them are comments rather than questions at this point in our feed. If you are thinking of raising your hand, please rather submit a question or comment in here. We're going to track everything that you guys said because I think they're really good things for us to revisit after the call and share with everyone. So we'll make sure we capture the comments here. But we're currently at 5 minutes to 3. We're going to go until 3:15 Eastern, which would, I guess, be 12 on the West Coast. But I want to make sure too, Tom, you have some great questions related to diversification and technology that we can shift to in a moment, just to make sure we cover more of the landscape of what we've been talking about. So I'll throw the floor back to you. But again, if you have thoughts, please do. We are paying attention to them. Please do put them in the comment section.
Thanks, Betsy. And thank you for your comments on that, Brek. I think that leads into one last question here to Branka on culture, which is an aspect we've touched on, maybe not directly dealt with in some ways, but that culture obviously impacts image and reputation, which in turn directly impacts recruitment and retention. How does the talent culture need to change to be more nurturing for diverse talents? How does that help us with diversity?
Thank you, Tom. So before I get to culture, I just wanted to tie the government role, that you asked in a previous question. The public policy is very important. And just as we rethink labor, we have to rethink also policies. For just one brief example, work-based learning is essential for developing skills in our industry. However, the old concept of 4 years long apprenticeship just doesn't fit the industry when you have a highly mobile workforce that flows between different companies and also independent contracting versus employment. It just doesn't fit. And then the new model of industry recognized apprenticeship programs is not allowed for, has not been approved for our sector. So there already the public policy needs to change. However, having said that, there are many government programs right now that we are not leveraging for talent development. And that's also part of the culture. We really need to collaborate more across sectors. For example, in our regional skills coalitions in Texas, Florida, and Arizona, we were able to secure funding for our students to go to community colleges for a number of weeks, obtain certifications and practical training at no cost to them. And then at the same time, we were able to secure wage subsidies for employers who were willing to take on those entry-level workers and train them on the job. I mean, 8 weeks, $15 an hour in Florida, that's a great help for a small employer who wants to take on that person and help and really help them to learn the job. So we need to change the culture to become much more talent-centric and collaborative, and to change mindsets, skill sets, and investments. That's very important. We need to invest in talent development and talent retention. That's the only way. If we engage more with talent and we really nurture the talent, that's the only way that young people, diverse talent, and also new workers will stay with us. Otherwise, we'll continue pouring money and time and losing them on the back end within 6 months. So really the culture needs to change. And we need to think of skill sets not only as technical skills, to become a great plumber or a great framer, but to also change the behavioral skills of our workers to make them really set for success, and to add to that resilience skills, which include technology skills and other skills, to be able to shift careers when the economy shifts, when the technology shifts, or the weather changes. So really a talent-centric culture that requires collaboration across all sectors. No more wars. no more competition. Collaboration, I think, is the way forward.
And I think that's such a positive, constructive way of terming it the way you have, that this really is about collaborative, win-win type of environment, but rethinking. I mean, as a devil's advocate, I could look and say, well, what we're doing as an industry isn't working. We still have shorting housages, labor problems, high costs, right? So something's not working right. Maybe we should be changing a little bit. And now you've raised technology, and that's a great segue here, since technology is so crucial to all aspects of the industry. And I know that many really view technology as a separate category, but in reality, it's a piece of and directly impacts modern day education and mentorship and career training, how students learn, the manner in which we train employees, communications with both inside and outside stakeholders, which, Branka, you just talked about that, engagement with customers, and of course, the hardcore manufacturing, building processes themselves are all impacted by technology. So just ask a more general question to all four of you panelists. What are the implications of technology today? How's it impacting career, company, worker, and potential recruits? And importantly, how do we integrate tech into education, mentorship, and career training so that we improve retention, right? That to me is really what this panel is about today. Who would like to start off with that one?
I can start.
Okay, Charner.
Some of the issues that we have on my end is that it's so much technology out there and you're not sure which company is using what. So what I try to do is I try to get the one that's the most popular, okay, that's right now, and teach them on that technology, as well as let them understand that there's others out there that they might want to look at, but hey, we're going to, like right now, scheduling, we teach on Primavera, okay? But we also teach them how to use it in Microsoft Project. We also let them know about other ways that they can learn it. I do tell them that technology as a whole in the construction industry hasn't changed that much. The only thing that's really changing is the input of the information. But if you know it the handwritten way, like if you know how to do a schedule by hand, you can put it in any software that there is. Same as with estimating. You can use any software there is as long as you know how to do it by hand. The thing that I really would like to see is more industry people or more industry companies, especially the ones that's involved with technology, partner with universities to say, hey, we can give you this amount of license for free and let our people show your students how to use it. That way, when they come into the industry, they have been taught by the person who actually developed the product and who is selling the product. I mean, what better way is that? I think that needs to be something that we need to think about more. Like the old saying goes, you don't get much with a closed hand. You got to open your hand to give in order to receive back. So I think if we have something where these kids are these young adults, not kids, sorry, are allowed to learn, they'll be allowed to teach when they go forward in their different respective companies.
And you're mentioning a really key aspect, Charner, in terms of tech companies or other companies. In the public policy world, we refer to them as stakeholders, right? And so the idea, what you're really saying, what I'm hearing is engage some non-traditional stakeholders to help teach these young adults, but that also has an incredible other impact. It helps with the messaging that Brek and everyone has talked about. It helps with the engagement with the universities that Ledger's talked about, right? It pushes the envelope in so many different ways. And it reminds me of an issue in the housing industry about a year ago that someone had about working with tech. And we said, well, have you reached out to Apple? Well, no, why would we? Well, because they're working on countertops that become an entire charging station. Have you reached out to ARP? Well, no. Why on earth would we reach out to ARP? Well, because they actually have the highest number of buyers of your product. You didn't know that, but they did research, right? This kind of attitude, which is, as Branka's talking about, a new way of looking at things, taking a fresh look. We had, before anyone else answers, I want to just get one question that came in to add to the mix, and that is how technologies like drones, virtual reality, augmented reality are changing the industry, if at all. Are we seeing any impact there?
If used correctly, but go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit. Like it gets sensationalized a lot right now, you know, in the marketplace. Everybody's talking about all these emerging technologies, and I think that's the challenge with a lot of this. Like, things are changing so fast. Every 6 months, we have new capabilities, and there's a new situation we're in that we have to deal with and cope with. And it's not just it's like everyone in the organization. Like at the executive level, I'm constantly looking at what new capabilities are coming about that's going to make it better for our workforce, that's going to make it better for our organization. So you take like augmented reality. Right now, they're struggling with implementing building information modeling at a production level in a residential with the residential home builders. I know they're working on it, but one of the big problems they have is what's called optionality. There's so many options on a house, and somehow we have to make a lot specific drawing that's modeled in 3D or 6D. And then we have to be able to take that and be able to get that digital file to devices in the field. And they have to be like, so we're doing a little bit of that right now. Like we've got these robotic total stations that we're doing our layouts with. It used to take a person that had decades of knowledge in plumbing to figure out how to lay out an underground plumbing system and then lay out the rough-in plumbing system. Now we can take a tool that we can load a digital file into, and we can take someone who knows nothing about plumbing and they can do a layout in probably almost half the time with fewer mistakes. But that wasn't even possible. It wasn't for us. It wasn't possible 2 years ago. So every time new little pieces of technology come about that make a new capability possible, then we are constantly looking at it saying, how can we adopt that? How do we adapt it and exploit it? And then how do we train our people to use it? And it's just constantly changing. So I think like it's hard to teach technologies at the university level because they're changing so fast, for one thing. So I agree there's got to be this partnership between industry, universities, and government on all that training and that work. But anyway, so I think like when it comes to AR, that's coming. And it's a matter of time. Right now, we've been working with a couple home builders right now on trying to figure out how to create lot-specific building information models so we can do just what you're talking about with virtual reality and augmented reality systems.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. He makes a really good point. I think, especially during the last year during COVID, and I think a lot of construction technology companies saw this as a great opportunity because a lot of construction stayed essential. But even just for construction technology in general, I think it's making more roles in construction. And the one thought that I've been wrestling with is, I'm almost posing a question, but I've been wrestling with this idea of, through construction technology, are roles becoming more specialized, or is the integration of technology going to be able to allow trades to cross over into adjacent trades? I think construction technology, like you're seeing different roofing softwares, plumbing softwares, and it's almost like they're vertically integrating into a trade, making it more specialized. And the point about that Branka brought up is, we're not in the industrialized era anymore. We're in the talent and sophisticated worker era. Like the threshold for workers, I'm picturing 10 years out from now, but the threshold to be a great operating worker in the field, you're going to have to be able to read digital blueprints. I mean, that's still a struggle that a lot of builders have said to us, is we can't get some of them to properly read a blueprint. And then when you're using collaboration software, the single source of truth, okay, now we need the most updated blueprint. I mean, just how rapid technology is changing already, even within the last year. I'm constantly wrestling with the question, are we becoming more specialized in a trade, or are we going to be able to cross over into adjacent? And what it looks from now is, now that technology is coming in and creating new roles, it's almost like we're getting more specialized.
And is that a challenge to you, Sean, on the educational level to keep up with technology? I mean, do you find yourself having to change a curriculum or syllabus on on a yearly basis, which I imagine for all the professors can be hard to keep up with as well. How do you manage that aspect?
So no, because we teach theory first. That
Okay.
is our main thing, is to teach theory first. And then we have technology that supports it. So maybe every 2 to 3 years, we might change the way that we, the software that we use as far as scheduling or estimating or blueprint reading. But we always going to foremost teach theory. And so it doesn't affect us as much now. But as Brek said, if it keeps getting more and more individualized, now are we going to have to break up as, hey, now we have general contractors space. Like, are we going to have to go individualized with our studies? Like learn plumbing on this level, learn this on this level, instead of doing the overview. Somebody mentioned earlier in the comments that I was reading that college is not for everybody. If we come especially specialize in each trade, then I think we're going to have to take that from the 4-year, away from the 4-year college to the individual trades apprenticeship. Okay. When I look at the 4-year college, I'm thinking more of my project managers, my superintendent, like a jack of all trades, somebody who knows enough about each subject to be dangerous, but it's not really a master of all the subjects. When I think of my trades, I think of my trades as a master of that subject. And so, and I know this is not going to sound good, but I wouldn't suggest my trade, somebody who wants to be in a trade specific, to go to a 4-year college. I would suggest that they go to a trade school, okay? Less debt, more intense learning on the thing that they want to learn, and they get to the workforce faster, and we can close this labor gap shortage with the trades. So that's my issue. But no, as far as technology, we update technology as needed. We can't do, like Ledger said, every 6 months. That's ridiculous. So we try to wait till it's a whole lot of changes in technology, or that is obsolete, it's not used anymore, before we switch to go into something else.
That makes sense. I think we're coming up on our time. Do we have a chance for a quick 1-sentence close from each panelist?
We do, and then we have a housekeeping issue. Please do stay on the line because there's an opportunity for you in it, as well as some updates on stuff to come. So yeah, one-liner would be great, and then Paige, if you can flip on the slides for us, that would be good.
I'm going to do hopefully a fun one that the panelists don't know about. I'm going to go to you first, Ledger. You're representing industry. Speak to Charner and all the educators out there. What does she need to keep doing to help you fill the pipeline and retain talent?
Well, I think she said it. I like how Dr. Rodgers spoke about the fundamentals. I think one thing that's largely missing from the stuff that we do is employees that come with us with a deep background in fundamentals. So I think that really helps a lot. But yeah, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate interacting with all of you guys today.
Thank you, Charner. You're speaking to Brek, who's representing technology in a sense, I'll say, since you're have built a platform. What does he need to do to help your students and students across the country to continue diversity and help fill the pipeline and retention?
Come teach us. We welcome any new technology and the way to use it. Nobody can teach it better than the person that has developed it. So I would tell everybody, come teach, come mentor us. We welcome it.
And Brek, you go to Branka, and broadly as someone who reaches across the country and across the world from a more of a policy standpoint, a big picture. What's the one message she should be carrying across the country?
I would say, to build the next generation workforce, we need to obsess over worker recognition.
And Branka, carrying all of these messages, but most importantly, your own to legislators, what's the public policy that needs to change to allow what all 4 of you have talked about today come into play and have a better pipeline, smarter pipeline, and long-term retention?
Well, I would say through the policies and investments that government can make, build truly a talent-centric culture across the industry and across different sectors, and inspire and fund collaborations that lead to talent development.
Fantastic. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to everybody who's joining. It was a real pleasure and fun. Betsy, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And Paige, if you just want to go to the last slide, since we're running out of light. Everyone that you heard from here today, as well as Rodney Hall and a few other people that we've invited, are going to be part of our labor working group, where we chat throughout the year and say, you know, we've discussed a lot of things that could be done in the industry today. What should we focus on through the Housing Innovation Alliance to drive change? How can we collaborate and take the best minds, best ideas of the minds who are here today, as well as others who are interested? So if you're interested in joining us, Paige is going to put my email address in the chat box for you. We will make that available. Just reach out to me directly and I'll let you know kind of the scope of this. This was our first third Tuesday event. You guys did a fabulous job. Next month, we're going to be focusing on the future of housing. I went to the CES event last week. We have a lot of people who are in leadership roles in different aspects of IBS joining us as well. So we're going to start off next month's first Tuesday event. Paige is leading that discussion. We're going to start it off with some highlights from IBS, some highlights from CES in terms of the future of housing, and then we're going to open it to more of an open discussion with everyone who's on the phone. So that'll be a nice meeting environment where everyone can share their video and chat and share ideas on the future of housing. So that'll be the 16th, I believe, of February, and then we're going to be looking at rethinking the supply chain, because a lot of stuff has happened in that area in March as well. So be sure to check out our events page of our website. Reach out to me directly if you have any questions. And if you liked what you heard today, look for our notes that we'll steal from your chats that you've given us over the course of today, as well as some key points that we pull from today's session and the archive. So we'll get that back out to you in the next few days. But thanks very much for your time and have a great rest of your day. Enjoyed connecting with you guys.
Thank you.